As the founding father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud inspired Carl Jung's development of analytic psychology. In 1906, a 30-year-old Carl Jung sent his first book, Studies in Word Association, to the 50-year-old Sigmund Freud. The elder invited the junior to visit him in Vienna. The two grew so close that Freud called Jung his adoptive son and sought to name Jung as his successor in the field of psychoanalytic theory. However, a decade into this bromance, the two went their separate ways over disagreements on personality theory, the concept of the collective unconscious, and the ego, among other theoretical points of contention. The schism dividing Freud and Jung has come to represent the schism between science and spirituality in a very broad strokes sense, where Freud focused on neuroscience and compared religion to a childhood neurosis. Jung focused on an empirical study of God, where Freud described the unconscious as a primitive beast with self-centered urges. Jung described the unconscious as the residence of the personal God image. Psychoanalytic theory was gaining traction around the time of Waite and Crowley, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and Carl Jung was coming into prominence around the time of a heightening global interest in spiritualism. As you're going to see, both the works of Freud and Jung on dream interpretation, free association, signs, and symbolism have much to offer a tarot reader seeking to better understand card interpretation. Jung's analytic psychology lends itself particularly well to helping us better understand our metaphysical explorations, such as the pictorial keys of the tarot. In the world of tarot specifically, we have incredible scholars and luminaries from Robert Wang and Sally Nichols to Mary Kay Greer, who have sought to understand the tarot through Jungian psychology, and their works have really come to shape contemporary tarot. This lecture is going to be a nutshell summary comparing Freud and Jung with some thoughts on how a tarot reader might reconcile Freud and Jung, science and spirituality, so that we might better understand the signs and symbolism of the cards. Welcome back to the Holistic Tarot video lecture series. In this session, let's consider how we might apply Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory and Carl Jung's analytic theory to operations with the tarot. Please be aware that I am not a psychologist and I have neither training nor formal education in psychology. I am not a professor and I am not a scholar. I just like to read books, and instead of writing a book report like you had to do in high school, I've made a YouTube video because times are changing. Let's start with a concise side-by-side comparison of Freud and Jung's biographies. Freud was an Austrian Jewish doctor of medicine in the fields of neurology and psychotherapy. The younger Carl Jung, meanwhile, was a Swiss Protestant doctor of medicine, somewhat in the same fields, though perhaps more precisely in psychiatry and psychology. Freud's theories are referred to as psychoanalysis, whereas Jung's school of thought is referred to as analytic psychology. Sigmund Freud didn't consider himself particularly religious and distinctly distanced his professional work from religiosity. But then, after his daughter Anna Freud was arrested by the Gestapo, Freud found himself strongly reclaiming his Jewish heritage. Carl Jung seemed to have always held an interest in not just religion, but mysticism as well. He came from a family of ordained ministers of the Swiss Reformed Church, and whether you want to call it religiosity or spirituality, this penchant for the mystical strongly influenced Jung's theories. He even wrote his doctoral thesis on the psychology of mediumship based on his studies of a family relative who was a self-professed psychic. The notable mark distinguishing Freud and Jung is Freud's emphasis on neuroscience versus Jung's emphasis on the spiritual nature of man. If we're applying Freudian psychoanalytic theory to the tarot, then a key purpose for using the cards would be to retrieve repressed experiences from childhood and to meaningfully process that. Tarot then has the ability to unearth and thus reveal what's been repressed. I think when in modern times, New Agers talk about shadow work revealing hidden urges or hidden fears and past trauma, what we mean is Freudian psychoanalytic theory applied to the tarot and not necessarily Jung's concept of the shadow. The premise here with Freudian theory is if you can reveal what you're repressing and face it, then you free yourself of those painful memories, and painful memories of the past no longer hurt you. It's a more long-lasting form of emotional healing. A Jungian analytic approach wouldn't be so much about retrieving repressed primal inner beast impulses as it would be about identifying your personality archetypes, even archetypes concealed by the inner shadow. Tarot, under Jungian analytic theory, would be about understanding your psyche, and we will get to a definition and discussion of what psyche is in a moment. There's almost this lofty spiritual purpose where you're seeking to understand the meaning of life, to answer the big existential questions of life. In short, if you seek to apply Jungian analytic theory to tarot, then the purpose of the tarot reading is individuation, another term we'll define and discuss shortly. Now, we can't very well talk about Freud and Jung and not talk about dream interpretation. Both put forth a theory that an analysis of our dreams can reveal solutions to the problems we are experiencing in our everyday waking life. So your brain is essentially trying to send you answers to your problems, but your brain communicates those solutions to you in signs and symbols, which sometimes your waking state doesn't know how to interpret. Dreams contain these packets of information, envelopes filled with important messages that float up to the surface from your deep unconscious. And then once your conscious mind receives that packet of information, it needs to unpack it from its envelope of signs and symbols. And if you manage to unpack the cryptic message your unconscious sends to you through your dream state, then you can release creative ideas and sparks of genius. In that sense, dreams are this mystical yet thoroughly practical way your higher self mentors and prepares your waking state for the future to come to help you process the present. Dr. Alan Hobson, a psychiatrist specializing in REM and dream state research, describes dreams as privileged communications from the unconscious part of the mind to the waking conscious part. Here, by privileged, we mean that the transmission of this message is protected, intended for your eyes only, for your interpretation and comprehension only. Likewise, we can replace dreams with tarot readings, and I would assert that these points all remain relevant, and we tarot readers intuit this profoundly, which is why I think there's such an enduring interest in Freud and Jung in the world of tarot. Wait, before we get into dream interpretation as part of psychoanalytic and analytic theory, let's head over to a sidebar. In Egypt, circa 2000 BC, a papyrus scroll called the Dream Book, also known as the Chester Beatty Papyrus, noted the importance of dreams in magic, religion, and even government rule. Assyrians and Mesopotamians viewed dreams as manifestations of either gods or demons. In esoteric Hindu and Buddhist beliefs, dreams were the soul wandering out of the body during the body's sleeping state. Greek philosophers were the first to propose a rational basis for dream interpretation or dream significance. Plato held that dreams were both divinely inspired and also inspired by the lawless, wild, and untamed beast within. Aristotle advanced the notion that dreams held the power to influence our waking state. As we progress in our study of the tarot, we are reconciling these principles and theoretics in dream interpretation with tarot card interpretation. Freudian psychoanalytic theory and Jungian analytic theory combined will give us a rational-based framework for thinking about the function and operation of the tarot. Let's talk about one psychological approach to working with tarot cards. This is premised on free association, where you pull a string of cards and run an exercise where you freely share your thoughts, first impressions, and what emotions you are feeling when you look at the images on those cards. This free association technique can lead to unexpected recall of memories or connections between events in your life that you otherwise did not realize were connected. Working with tarot cards does not require belief in or dabbling with the supernatural. These works of art and illustrations are mirrors that will help you acknowledge and confront your true emotional state. How do these cards make you feel? Who does the King of Swords remind you of from your life right now, especially when put side by side with that worker bee diligent Eight of Pentacles? What emotions, day-to-day experiences, or memories come through when you look at that Five of Swords? Are you prone to identifying with that guy in front with all the swords, or the guys in the back who feel defeated? In a psychological approach, there's no right or wrong per some standardized uniform set of card meanings. How these cards make you feel and what the associated keywords trigger in you are what matters. When a string of emotionally challenging cards that are difficult for you to look at, these are the most powerful readings you can possibly get from the cards. It's an opportunity to confront recurring themes in your life that are patterns of self-destruction or negative self-talk that need addressing. Now let's explore some of the ways Freudian psychoanalytic theory and Jungian analytic theory diverge from one another when it comes to the very fundamental purpose of signs and symbols. Freud and Jung differ. Freud noted that signs and symbols disguise repressed urges, socially negative impulses, and fears. Jung, on the other hand, noted that signs and symbols allow inner archetypes of an empowered self to become actualized. Freud's approach to signs and symbols is as coping mechanisms for that which we have repressed, which we cannot confront head on, so they come to us disguised for the purpose of revealing ulterior motives. Jung sees signs and symbols as pieces that make up the inner archetype of the soul or consciousness. Another point of divergence between the two psychiatrists was in the meaning of the collective unconscious. Freud limited the scope of an unconscious mind to the personal, whereas Jung believed there was both a personal unconscious and, in addition, a concept of a collective unconscious. Where Freud described the personal unconscious as a reservoir of repressed fears, your animal nature, and the source of your desires, Jung described collective unconscious as intergenerational shared memory, which all have access to. The individual unconscious is connected to that collective unconscious. Earlier, we used the word psyche in passing reference without defining it yet. Let's discuss psyche here as structure of personality. Freud and Jung both discuss ego, but they give slightly different definitions. According to Freud, your ego mediates between your superego and your id. The superego is the structure of personality formed from wanting to uphold morality, the rules of society, and learned social standards. The id is basically the opposite. This is you giving in to your primal and most selfish, self-centered urges, impulses, and desires. Your id, under Freudian theory, is further subdivided into eros and thanatos. Eros represents urges and impulses driven by a desire to live, indulging in food, materialism, indulging in sensual pleasures. This is also you doing whatever it takes for you to survive, even at the expense of a greater good, and even against logic. Thanatos represents urges and impulses driven by a desire to die because the pain and suffering of life feels too great to bear. This is Hamlet's soliloquy, to be or not to be, as Hamlet contemplates death and suicide. This is the behavior of self-harm and self-destruction. Jung frames the psyche a little differently. The outer shell of your personality is the persona. This is the mask you put on in social interactions, adapted per social standards and the rules of society in a way that maximizes your chances of success in this world. Underneath the ego is the shadow. The shadow archetype is the unconscious part of your mind that your ego refuses to identify itself with, so you reject this part of your personality structure. Two interesting aspects about Jungian shadow. One, what you condemn and criticize vehemently in others is something you are that you project onto others because you refuse to accept it as part of yourself. And two, more positively, what you admire in others is in fact part of your own shadow or potential of being. What you admire in others are virtues you absolutely possess in potential deep within that shadow realm. Jungian analytic theory is very binary and gendered in a binary way, so that's just something to be mindful of as we discuss Jung's structure of personality. Jung notes that your external presentation of gender and internal identification with gender has this built-in polarity. If you present as a man and you feel like you've got the personality of a man, then there is an anima within, a feminine component to your psyche. If you present as a woman and you feel like you've got the personality of a woman, then there is an animus within, a masculine component to your psyche. This opposite of whatever gender you identify as is a source of challenge in your life, the subterranean, submerged underworld layer to your personality that can impact or is connected at the root to your shadow. Part of the sacred marriage of the opposites is when you can bring balance and harmony to this innate gender polarity. Returning to the Jungian ego, the ego layer of psyche, this structure of your personality, is subdivided into extroversion and introversion. There's another yin and yang binary vibe here, yes, but also you're both. You might be more extroverted with only a little bit of introversion, or you are mostly introverted with only spots of extroversion. So it's not always a balanced 50-50. In fact, it rarely is. The aspect of your ego that is extroversion is where you prefer to be with the outside world, among people and among objects. The aspect of your ego that is introversion is where you prefer to be sitting quietly in solitude with your own thoughts and feelings. Now let's talk about the mind, which is to be differentiated from the concept of the psyche. Psyche is the structure of personality, whereas the mind is going to be diagrammed as a structure of awareness. We begin with the first level of awareness, your conscious mind. Here, Freud and Jung agree that the conscious mind is the present and active state of awareness. When we get to the second level of the mind, that's where they differ. Freud talks about the preconscious mind as a pool of accessible memories, though it may take some effort to recall or access those memories. Jung describes the next layer of awareness as the personal unconscious. Here is where knowledge and memory are archived. This is involuntary thinking, feeling, sensing, and your intuition. Freud's concept of the unconscious mind is a level of unawareness in the mind, of repressed urges, repressed because you are aware on some level that they are undesirable. This is the animal or beast within that drives your thoughts, feelings, and behavior. You may not realize it, but often it's your unconscious mind who is operating you at the wheel, and you have no idea. Jung's concept of the unconscious emphasizes the collective unconscious. Like Freud's unconscious, you're not aware of this level of the mind, and it's the part of your mind you inherit at birth. Like Freud's unconscious mind, this is the level of your mind containing impulses you are not aware of, universal to all of humankind. And here is the innate drive to know the angel or know the demon. One comparative aspect of Freud and Jung particularly pertinent to tarot readers might be what the two psychiatrists had to say about the source of psychic power. Freud believed the libido was the sovereign power over all psychic energy, whereas Jung believed it was the transcendent function, the operation of pursuing individuation from which psychic power and energy arises. Libido is the hunger for the heretical, that instinctive impulse inside of you that fuels your desires and activate it. It overrides the superego. Libido is drive plus tension, which directs our behavior. The transcendent function is the will to actualize the inner God archetype or emanation. At its essence, you accrue psychic power and energy when you pursue the path of healing, when you triumph over a dark night of the soul, which is the catalyst toward individuation, and you choose the sacred marriage, you generate psychic power. Inner conflicts arise from the disparity and separation of our inner opposites. We harness our psychic energy when we are driven to unite and harmonize those opposites. Meanwhile, libido also refers to what fuels our desire for love. It's the sexual instinct. Psychiatric symptoms, writes Freud, are a result of misdirection of libido. Both theories for the source of psychic power, whether it be libido or the transcendent function toward individuation, is irrational, meaning it is not rooted in logical reasoning or analysis. If I may, I liken Freud's concept of libido to Crowley's Scarlet Women or the goddess Babylon that is within us, while Jung's transcendent function is the alchemical union of opposites preceding knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel. Now let's focus on one of the more salient points of Freudian psychoanalytic theory, and that would be his writings on defense mechanisms. Compensation is when you play up a strength to such an imbalanced extreme degree as a means to overcompensate for something you know is a very severe weakness. You amplify a strength so you don't feel so bad about your worst weakness. Denial as a defense mechanism is when you basically just reject reality. You refuse to acknowledge the problem. Displacement is when you can't get your big boss at work to recognize your achievements and it frustrates you, so you come home and take it out on your kid when your kid forgets to put the dishes away. That's displacement in a nutshell. Identification is when you inflate your sense of self-worth by attaching that self-worth to a social group, political cause, or even idol that you hold in high esteem. Introjection is when you play by the rules for social approval, and because everyone in society approves you, that increases your sense of self-worth. Projection is almost like a form of denial, where instead of seeing certain character flaws in yourself, you project it onto others and condemn others for possessing that character flaw that you totally have yourself. Yep, that's a defense mechanism because it helps you maintain a positive sense of self-worth. You don't have to confront your flaws. Continuing on, rationalization is when you justify or excuse your own bad behavior. Sure, you did the bad thing, but that's because. Regression is when you regress back to one of the coping mechanisms you used as a kid, whining or pouting and throwing a tantrum when you hear bad news when you're a 45-year-old adult, or overeating as a coping mechanism because when you were a baby and every time you cried, mom just put a bottle in your mouth and fed you. Sublimation as a defense mechanism is when you transmute your negative impulses into otherwise socially acceptable behavior. Instead of working through the complex emotions of mourning over the death of someone you love, you throw yourself into work productivity. Where Freud, both Sigmund Freud and his daughter Anna Freud, were known for their work in defense mechanisms, perhaps what Jung became most known for was his work with archetypes, or fundamental human motifs. Carl Jung espoused that the psyche and the mind could be understood through archetypes, which are original models or prototypes of a person, a personality trait, or behavior. These are going to be universally recognized by all. While there are so many different ways to designate archetypes in the tarot, the specific attributions you see on screen are based on Golden Dawn astrological correspondences, and thus planetary archetypes per the Sacred Seven. Mercury, for instance, is assigned to Key 1, the Magician card, and the archetype or original model of a person and personality associated with Mercury is the Bard. Some might make less sense, such as why the Tower card appears here for the Warrior. That's because Mars, the planet, is associated with the archetype of the Warrior, and Mars corresponds with Key 16, the Tower. As an exercise, consider these 7 archetypes and what tarot cards you personally would assign to each. Archetypes in story are narrative arcs or character tropes that we all recognize because they were born out of a collective unconscious, which we all inherited. We are all connected to these archetypal forms: the hero's journey, battling a monster, rags to riches, voyage and return. Every culture, every civilization, in every period of time has stories following these archetypal forms with these archetypal characters. An archetype is inherited knowledge. When you were born, this information was already pre-downloaded, prefabricated into your mind, and it governs your behavior. Jung draws a parallel to instincts. There are 2 important forms of archetype for us to consider. The first is the archetype of the self, which can be pictorialized as a circle with a dot at the center, the dot representing the ego. This can also be represented by the mandala. The archetype of the self is best understood when the sacred alchemical marriage happens between the polarities of your inner self, your inner opposites, that anima and animus we covered earlier. The second is the archetype of our chosen God image. Jung talked quite a bit about spirituality, mysticism, and religious practice, and how religious or mystical practice can induce individuation. Individuation is when you fully understand yourself as an individual in the context of all that you've come to know about the collective unconscious. In one sense, individuation happens when you can locate and identify the archetype of the self as distinct and different from the, quote, undifferentiated unconscious mind, end quote. And you'll know you've achieved this when the archetype of the self reflects an archetype of the God image. Let's see if I can explain individuation a bit better than that. I admit that was a whole lot of mumbo jumbo. Individuation. Think about the word individual. How do you define yourself as an individual within the context of the world you are operating within? Typically, says Jung, individuation occurs in the latter half of your adult life because a prerequisite is lived experience and enough time to have processed that lived experience. Though we say individual and it sounds like a singularity, that singularity is by its fundamental nature a binary. Before you can understand the one, you must understand the two as parts, and then find a way to harmonize the two into one, the one individual. That's the alchemical sacred marriage in Western occultism and, well, individuation in Jungian psychology. In the same way we conceptualize a theological monad, the one true God, the inner masculine and inner feminine, or the outer and inner polarities, when in union, will manifest or actualize an emanation of the divine, meaning you make your mark among the collective unconscious. Your intangible personal unconscious is no longer unconscious, but made aware, self-aware within that greater collective unconscious. Actualizing the inner God archetype does not mean you become God or godlike. No, it means you actualize awareness of an emanation of the divine. To achieve any of this, we must confront our own shadow, journey through the dark night of the soul, which is the dominion of the shadow. The inner God archetype is reached after confronting the inner shadow archetype. And this doesn't mean that you confront your own vices and transgressions. Within the shadow is also your greatest virtue, which you've been unaware of. Remember how he said that the virtues you admire most in others, that you envy most in others, is also that one great virtue you already possess, but is hidden within your shadow? Thus, in brief, individuation is a process of personal growth and empowerment that is part salvation, likened to the concept of nirvana in Eastern religious philosophy, and part self-awareness that leads to spiritual liberation. It's important to note here that Jung himself never really clearly defined the term individuation. He certainly talked around the subject quite a bit, though. The process of individuation is called the transcendent function. Individuation necessitates mindfulness and knowing thyself. It's the transcendent function inspired by the inner God archetype, resulting in the successful integration of the otherwise dissonant inner parts of you. All the parts of the whole that previously appeared to not fit together finally fit together in balanced harmony, and as a result of that, you are made whole. It's the upper integrated with the lower, as above, so below. It's the inner self integrated with the outer self, as within, so without. The masculine side integrated with the feminine, Jung's theory of the anima and the animus. And while individuation is inherently a paradox of achieving to know the unknowable, Jung offers study of the outer world beyond you as the starting point for individuation. When you study anthropology, physics, astrology, sociology, mythology, literature, history, religion, and mysticism, you start to see the universal archetypes and recognize what we've all inherited. Jung has commented quite a bit on both astrology and alchemy. In fact, he likened individuation to an alchemical process, a process that stabilizes the ego once there has been a union of the opposites. You see the Western alchemical four elements embedded into the structure of the tarot and elemental dignities, how cards interact with one another to yield specific interpretations. This is based on alchemy. Astrological correspondences in the tarot reveal the fundamental motifs that are the driving forces in those particular cards. In Jung on Alchemy, edited by Nathan Schwartz Salient from Princeton University Press, alchemy is this perfect framework through which to understand analytic theory and, by extension, the tarot. In both, there's a theory of a unitary process, this greater quest to achieve the ultimate substance, case in point, the philosopher's stone, the great work. It's through alchemy that we derive the Hermetic principle of opposites and the binary, and how conflict drives expansion, but condensation and preservation takes us closer to unity, and both processes are essential. Jung found the principle of archetypes as the underlying structure in both astrology and alchemy, which then intersect in the tarot. In alchemy, essential elements combine in processes that result in chemical changes. The same principle is found in astrology, and by extension, how the essential archetypes in tarot combine when you interpret a spread of cards. In mythology, we learn what the archetypal journeys are: the grail quest, vengeance, the quest to discover who you really are, death and rebirth, the dying god. These narratives are roadmaps for our own journeys toward individuation. Religion instructs us on the archetypes of character, the various inner god images we can aspire for. A patron god or goddess is our way of visualizing the inner god image. In the same way, elements corresponding to the sacred seven in astrology combine in processes toward that ultimate substance, the great work. Archetypes composite during the transcendent function toward individuation, where self awareness of the individual is the great work. And the checklist you see on screen isn't just instructive for those seeking individuation or where you go to better understand universal human archetypes, but this checklist is what you'll want to study if you seek to deepen and advance your practice of the tarot. In this holistic tarot study series, I wanted to dedicate a video lecture to discussing psychoanalytic and analytic psychology and showcase how tarot is used as an integrative tool for understanding the structure of our personality and for exploring our different levels of awareness. In that sense, tarot is like a safe space platform where packets of information from the unconscious mind is more likely to surface up and be revealed to the conscious mind of awareness. Studying Freud and Jung will give you a really strong foundation for thinking about how you might approach interpreting the signs and symbols in a tarot card reading and how to optimize interpretation to retrieve valuable insights from the unconscious mind. When we start talking about operations of the tarot, it's almost impossible to not come across references to Jungian psychology or psychospirituality inspired by Jungian thought. And a lot of what we credit to Jung should probably be credited to Sigmund Freud. So I hope this crash course, keyed specifically to the tarot reader, will be a good enough starting point of reference for understanding the context of conversations on tarot, archetypes, shadow, Freud, and Jungian psychology.